Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dynamic Character Productions' weekly recap for our 5th mini Trinity Falls. I'm your new recap host, Jon Millsip, taking over for Alex as he graduates to just hosting duties. And I am joined here this week by two fantastic two-time DCP players, Durrett and Michael Riley. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
I am doing great. I always like to represent one of my seasons. So today, since I have my Poisson tribe member here with me, that's what we're going with. So I'm super excited to talk about these episodes.
Hey, got the green. Yeah, I'm excited to, for the first time, be like on the other side after I've played these to not know what's happening. But back to back, but finally get to see like a new one that I know nothing about. So.
Well, we're very happy to have you here today. We have this brand new cast, 15 people for the first time in a DCP mini. What are your first impressions just looking at this cast right away?
Oh, I just saw them and I was like, I know Mike. And it's like, I posted Andrew and everyone else was just like, hopefully if you live up to those two, good times. So yeah, looks good to me.
Yeah, agreed. There's a lot of like big personalities in this cast. So it's fun to put a whole bunch of people in a mini, very like high pressure format and see how they all interact. And it should be good.
Yeah, during the casting process for this season, it was definitely very apparent. We were dealing with some big personalities this time, and we are going to have some fantastic character moments throughout the season. But let's get started with it. Episode 1, we are introduced to the lovely, as always, McKenna Feeney with her brand new co-host, Mr. Alex Trias. And right away into it, we break down these 15 players into tribes. For the first time ever, we are starting with 3 starting tribes. So we have the Iguazu tribe, which has Mike, Luke, Jonathan, Lo, and Emily. The Kirka tribe with Lee, Lydia, Selkirk, Vee, and Ben. And the Tugela tribe featuring Lexington, who does go by Lex for the majority of the game. So if we're referring to Lex, that's who we're talking about. We're talking about Lexington. Austin, Andrew, John, and Sarah. These tribes, they seem great. We have some discussion later in the episode from Sarah, kind of about like the fact she's the only girl on the Tugela tribe. That's because if you watch any of the preseason content, you'll know that John was actually one of our somebody we had on standby in case someone dropped out, and we did. So he went in there. So that tribe was also going to have 2 women on it to start, but unfortunately, someone wasn't able to make the cast. So John got in there, which made Sarah a little nervous, but we can get to that a little later. Immediately, right away, into a challenge. Now, both of you have played a mini before. What's it like going from that introduction, hey, here's your tribe, straight into, you're going to talk to each other, this is what you have to compete in?
It's so bad. It's so stressful. I just also remember how long that first challenge was. It was kind of a similar situation where that word puzzle really killer. It's just like sitting there and like, especially because it was my first ever game. Just the stress, hard to describe until you're in it, and then you'll realize like, oh God, like it's just on, So.
Yeah, it's really tough to have a challenge like this be the first challenge where it's so individual. For me, I was fortunate where it was all about teamwork. But for this, everybody has to do their part and carry their part for the whole tribe. And if one person messes it up, then that's going to put a target on your back immediately. So yeah, this is a really stressful challenge. And I did not feel great for them. I was very sorry for them.
Yeah, so we get to it, our first immunity challenge, Step Together. In this challenge, tribes will compete in a relay race with 1 tribe member responsible for each leg of the race. There are 5 different legs to the race. They're all different, and they have to be completed in order. So normally this would be where tribes were told what all of these legs are, what they have to do to compete in this challenge. But instead, McKenna and Alex throw us this curveball. Tribes are only given a one-word description of each leg and then have to decide which one they're going to be responsible with only that one word. So those words are pulling, calculating, rolling, spinning, and solving. These words tell you nothing about what this challenge is going to be.
Yeah.
So, yes, Scott?
Oh, I was going to say solving, it's a puzzle, but you don't know what the puzzle is. Like you could be good at some puzzles and not good at other types of puzzles. So, yeah, that's the only hint that you could get, but it still doesn't tell you all that much.
Yeah,
no, and we even see some of the discussion later on that people were thinking rolling would be this very physical, like rolling on the floor type of deal, which I mean maybe in another game, but not in this one. So the tribes go into their breakout rooms and they decide their order. So we have, for the Kirka tribe, pulling is Selkirk, calculating is Lee, rolling is Ben, spinning is Vee, and solving is Lydia. For the Iguazu tribe, we have Mike pulling, Luke calculating, Low rolling, Jonathan spinning, and Emily solving. And then for the Tugela tribe, we have Lex pulling, John calculating, Sarah rolling, Andrew spinning, and Austin solving. Now we finally get to figure out what each of these legs are going to be. So in pulling, you have to build a stack of 3 dice with a quarter of an index card in between each of them. And you have to remove the index card while keeping your dice stack standing without touching the dice. Calculating, you have to solve a math equation only using pen and paper, and none of these fancy adding and subtracting technologies we have out there. No phones, no calculators, no computers, nothing. And the answer is going to be a 3-digit number, with each digit being between the numbers 1 and 6. And then after you have solved the equation, you have to send the answer to the tribe mate doing rolling, who is then going to roll 3 dice sequentially to match the 3-digit number they've been given. And if they're wrong, the solving person has to go back and solve the equation correctly to give them the correct answer for rolling again. Spinning has to spin 10 times while holding an upside-down solo cup in one hand and a ping pong ball in the other. After they spin 10 times, they have to put the ping pong ball on top of the cup, toss the ping pong ball up into the air, and catch it in their cup. But if you miss, you have to spin 5 more times before you can attempt the catch again. And then finally, we have solving, which a DCP classic, unscramble the letters to solve a 4-word phrase. What do you guys think about these legs? Like, how comfortable would you feel going from the one-word descriptions of these legs to the actual description of the leg? And how would you feel? Which one do you think might be the most misleading of them?
I mean, I think I agree with a lot of the Castaways that the rolling one was kind of, I wouldn't have immediately necessarily thought of it. Which is odd, which either way, I probably would have liked to do that one anyway.
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh, I'm just gonna roll on the floor, cool. Or I'm just rolling dice. But yeah, that's the one where it's just like, because like the spinning, maybe with the ping pong ball, I wouldn't have thought of, but like I figure spinning a bunch of times probably. Calculating is probably some sort of other puzzle or solving situation. And then pulling, I immediately assumed, oh, it's gonna be like pulling like solo cups with the cards, and I was like, Dad, no, thank you for me. I'll skip that one. So
yeah, the pulling I think is misleading because like some of them couldn't even understand what the word was. They misheard something else. So so that one, yeah, I wouldn't have necessarily thought about the card pulling. And then if I had volunteered myself for that and found out what it was, I would have been like, oh God, I'm first person out. There's no way I'm doing that.
Yeah, definitely. We do see later in the episode that which was it? The Kirka tribe was a little confused. I guess Alex's Philly accent kind of got in there a little bit, and they thought it was pooling instead of pulling. But in the end, I don't really think that would have changed the outcome of this one all that much. We get to this challenge, and we see Mike immediately get these dice pulled out. He pulls his index cards, his dice are stacked, and the Iguazu tribe is just flying. They get to this first math equation first, and as they're calculating this math equation and sending it to Low to do the rolling and everything, we see Lex pull out his cards. So then Tugela's catching up, but Selkirk is struggling. And as it turns out, Selkirk's using these tiny dice. Now, I made sure to get an example here. So this is your standard D6. It's just a regular D6. You buy it at a dollar store, like the ones that Lex bought at Dollar Tree, except way less colorful. This is a wargaming D6. This is the type of D6 Selkirk was using. And the side-by-side comparison, it's quite a bit smaller. It's about a quarter of the size of this regular D6 here. And because of that, it's a lot lighter. And it's a lot harder to get enough tension with the index cards to pull them out quickly without moving the dice. And we see him really struggling here. We see the Kirker tribe's so supportive during all of it, but you can tell Selkirk's just getting defeated because he's like, I don't know if I can even finish this with the dice that I have here.
Yeah, I would not want to be in that position at all. With those I didn't even realize they were that small. I knew he said they were, but they got it clearly. There's little strategies around it, but yeah, that would no matter what, you'd always be the last person to finish that step. So just a rough deal, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It took Selkirk probably around 15 to 20 minutes to get this part of the challenge finished. Now, it doesn't feel that way with the episode, but it was a long time. There's a lot of that challenge cut out there. And in the meantime, the Iguazu tribe solves or calculates their math equation. They roll the correct answer. And Jonathan very quickly completes the spinning, first toss, catches that ball, and Emily starts on this word scramble. So Emily sits down with the word scramble. Tugela is catching up. They're also working on the calculating. They solve the math equation. They send it to the rolling team. The rolling squad gets it correct. We have our spins. Again, single catch right away. And now Austin's off solving this word puzzle as well. And Selkirk's still trying to pull his index cards out. In probably one of the most shocking things we have ever seen in DCP, Austin almost immediately solves this word scramble. The speed that Austin solves this is unquestionably one of the fastest word scrambles I've ever seen solved in one of our games. And at that point, the pressure's on because Tugela has immunity. Selkirk's still trying to pull his index cards out, and Emily's just stuck on this word scramble. What has to be going through her mind at this point?
I don't know. I mean, this is what I was saying. The pressure is on. If you don't solve this after having this big of a lead, I mean, you might as well just leave right at that moment. I would think if I was her, this really was, and it was kind of difficult, but even still, I mean, just with the lead that you had to lose this challenge is such a huge blow. So I felt bad for her.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's always the pressure on that last person in one of these challenges. Like a lot of it ends up hinging on you if you're like the puzzle person, or in this case, the word scramble. Uh, but oh, it's just when you have so much time in theory, it's like if you screw it up, it's never gonna be a good look, especially since everyone else was so fast.
Yeah, it's definitely there's always that pressure put onto that last place position, that anchor role in any type of relay. And in this challenge, it just also happens to be one of the more difficult aspects because it's more ambiguous than the other 4 legs of this challenge. So it can definitely be difficult. And eventually, like Emily's struggling on this still, and Selkirk, with the help of the rest of his tribe, they realize, we got to try different strategies. They try like kind of like folding the card a little bit. So they're like funneling the die on top of the other one. That's not working. Then eventually Ben says, okay, take that first index card that you managed to get out somehow and just use it to make sure that other one does not move. And like, this is a very kind of ingenious way to get around that no touching rule that was established at the beginning, where it's like, you can't touch the dice. But I mean, it was never specified you couldn't use the index card that you've already removed to continue to hold the dice in place. What do you think of this strategy and this approach to this challenge?
Oh, so good. I like so good to come up with that on the spot, just like to do that. I mean, it clearly worked because I don't know how they would have gotten it otherwise. So, like, they probably would have, Selkirk probably still would have been going at it now.
Yeah,
if that was not the case.
Kirka hacked this challenge like crazy because you had Ben, and they deserve to win this challenge for all of this, and Lee paying attention to what numbers were coming up. Like, that's smart when you're sitting there all that time with nothing to do. That's, yeah, look around at what the other tribes are doing. So based off all that, they managed to get themselves back in this challenge.
Yeah, Lee realizing that the other 2 tribes both submitted the exact same number for the rolling and coming to the conclusion that means this equation has to be the same for all 3 of us. And then immediately sending that answer to Ben as soon as Selkirk managed to get those index cards pulled meant that Ben could start rolling immediately. And it really caught them back into the challenge. Yes, Emily's probably had a good 5 to 8 minutes on this word scramble already at this point. But now all of a sudden, after Vee is the only person to miss the spinning ball toss on the first toss, Lydia's finally sitting down with this word scramble. She is now, you're on an even playing field. Yes, Emily's had a little more time. She's clearly struggling with this. So maybe Lydia can pull an Austin and quickly solve it. Unfortunately, that's not the case. About 8 to 10 minutes after Lydia starts solving, it seems there's no progress happening for either of these 2 tribes. So McKenna says, okay, each tribe can put in a second solver to help with the word scramble. So Kirka, we see Lee volunteer. Lee discussing later that the reason he's volunteering here is because he kind of hacked his part of the challenge and wanted to still show he was able to actually do something in the challenge. And then Luke stepping up for the Iguazu tribe. And they're still not getting anywhere. So after another 5 minutes or so, Alex says, okay, I'm giving you another hint. We're going to give you the first letter of each of these words. The first word starts with Y, second word starts with T, third word starts with S, and the fourth word starts with A. And with a little more time, eventually, Lydia says, your tribe stays afloat. Kirka has completed the comeback. They've secured themselves immunity, sending the Iguazu tribe to tribal council. This was just a roller coaster of emotions here. It was a roller coaster of a challenge, ups and downs. I don't know if we've ever seen a comeback to this extent in DCP history.
Not that I can think of. Not that I was there for. Definitely not that. Like I mean, if I was Kirka, like I would be like ecstatic that it's just like, oh, because I feel like knowing myself, I would have just been prepared for the worst. Be like, we're going to tribal, like, goddamn. But yeah, it's just a really like lucky break, and they deserve it. I mean, at the end they got it. So
Yeah, it was quite the comeback. And like I said, if I was Emily, I'd be like, I'd be going home. And if I was the other members on her tribe, I'd be like, well, at least it's not me, but may not always be the case.
Well, before we get to Iguazu, we do check in with the two winning tribes. Tugela, obviously very happy they won. Lex, just completely ecstatic winning that challenge. It talks about how it's so important to win that first challenge so that you can have some time with your tribe and start gelling a little bit before having to get into game mode and start voting people off. Austin, on the other hand, is a little worried about his performance in the puzzle, which is strange because he did so well, but that's what's so worrying to him. He feels that he solved that puzzle so much faster than everyone else that it just paints a target on his back. What do you guys think? In the first challenge in a mini, should you be worried about how fast you're solving a puzzle?
I mean, when it's as fast as he did compared to the other two, I think yes. Because it immediately puts a spotlight not only within your own tribe, but even to the other tribes, like that this is someone I have to like look out on. Like I mean, people start already saying his name, so being like as someone who's like he did that so fast, like kudos to him, but also horrifying. So yeah, not necessarily the best start, and it would have seemed it at first, but then yeah, once you're in it, ooh, makes it a little scarier.
Yeah, it may not hurt him now during the tribal phase. People might see that as an asset, but if he does make it to the merge, then that's absolutely something that people are going to remember and look at to target.
Absolutely. It's one of those interesting like dichotomies that Survivor presents with the tribal phase going into the individual phase, is that strength, like challenge strength, is so important in the early game because you're avoiding voting people out. But it also paints you in this like very terrifying light when you get to the individual game. And it means that people are a lot more wary of you when you get to that point. So it's always interesting watching players balance that. And it's going to be interesting seeing how Austin does so moving forward. Other than that, we get, Sarah kind of just like talks about how nervous she is a bit about being the only woman, but after talking to everyone, she doesn't feel like that's really a concern at all. She mentions that her and Lex are both from Seattle, so that's a connection, and that's the type of connection you're looking for in a mini, because when you don't know these other people on your tribe, you're looking for any reason to connect with people just to get numbers. So having a geographical connection like that can be incredibly strong. But at the same time, Lex is like, oh, this is probably a good thing, but it might be a bad thing because everyone knows we're from Seattle. And we immediately cut to Jon saying, they're both from Seattle. I got to keep an eye on that. So after, the quick check-in with the Tugela tribe, let's check in with the Kirka tribe. Lydia, who is even more ecstatic than Lex was about winning this challenge, rightfully so. But she very much mentioned the fact that her approach to that challenge was just making sure to keep positive the entire time, keep the good vibes flowing. So, especially because Selkirk's a new player, and she doesn't want Selkirk to have a bad experience because he messes up on his first challenge ever playing in an org. What do you think of that strategy going in? Like, is there a point where you can be too vocal about like the positivity? Because we saw other tribes mentioning the fact that Kirka was being so positive the entire time. But is there too much positivity you can put in the situation?
I mean, I think there could be. I think if it depends on how long that positivity lasts. Like obviously, if it's the first challenge, it's like everyone wants to win it. But I think it depends on whether people are gonna then just assume they're all like tribe strong and stuff if they are like every challenge trying to be that positive, especially if it's really outweighing the other two. But I think outside of that, like it's always good to have some positive mindset in a challenge. It always makes it go at least a little bit better in my experience. So
Yeah, I thought it was good to see that positivity, because this is a tribe full of vets, except for Selkirk. So having all of them sort of like, you know, rally around him and like bring him up to make this first org experience a good one for him, I thought was nice to see, especially because he definitely would have been in trouble had they lost. So
yeah, it's definitely one of those things where someone like Selkirk, that first vote's so hard to make, to find validation for someone to target. So when someone struggles like Selkirk does, it makes him an easy target. So winning there gives him a little bit of time to kind of like get his bearings, meet people. That's the big thing. He hasn't met anyone by the time he's completed that challenge. So he gets that chance to meet people and kind of acclimatize himself to the game. So lucky for Selkirk, Kirka did win. We have Selkirk talking about his little dice. And then Lee breaks down the fact that he was watching both other tribes and figured out that calculating stuff. But Vee kind of takes note of that. She's like, Lee noticed that they had the same number, which isn't the normal way people would think about this. So I have to be very careful about Lee. So even Lee, in kind of hacking this challenge, is showing his knowledge of games and showing that he could be a threat simply because of his way of thinking differently than everyone else. And then we get Ben, and Ben just says that he's really hit it off with Vee. And if he had to pick a number one, that would be who it was. And he wants to move forward with Vee and one of either Selkirk or Lydia. So it's really hard in this point because these people are all in the same room, so it's hard to make those connections. But it's good to know where these players' heads are at before they start scrambling. So we can look out for who they do end up talking to when eventually they do need to scramble. Then we get to the Iguazu tribe. And we keep the good vibes going, despite the fact that this is a losing tribe, with Mike just talking about how happy he is to be back and we're happy to have Mike back. Mike Reick, obviously a fantastic character. Always happy to have him on our screens. And he kind of says the obvious, you know, Emily didn't do so well, and like we don't really have much to go on. So I guess that's who we should be targeting. Now, counter that with Emily immediately saying, okay, guys, let's go scramble right now. Fantastic. I love seeing this in a mini where we have someone just encouraging people to get scrambling and talking right away and not just having 5 people sit awkwardly in a room together. And throughout that scramble, we hear Luke say, it sets a bad precedence if we always vote out the weakest person in a challenge. What do you two think about this approach to the beginning of a mini?
Well, first of all, let me say, for those who don't know, Mike is my guy, if you haven't seen Monte Carlo, but taking myself out of it, from that, I still think that it's an interesting approach because, Mike said this in his exit interview. If you're not voting people out based off the challenge performance, like the first vote, then you're really basing it off of like nothing, which is a tough strategy to keep up with, so it's like people are starting to play real hard, right out of the gate. So they're getting out somebody who they think is going to be a big threat, but also voting out somebody who could be a shield for longer than Emily might be, which Luke says that they could just vote out Emily if they go out next or if they go to tribal next, but you don't know how long you're going to be in these tribes. So Emily's functionality as a shield might start to decrease very quickly if you don't vote her out right now. So.
Yeah, because it sets this interesting situation for kind of even the rest of the probably even the rest of the game, but at least with what we've seen where challenge performance won't really matter seemingly as much, but and it helps with people who I guess are more worried about those early challenges to help keep yourself insulated. But at the same time, you don't want to be that tribe that suddenly is one person and there's 10 people still, there's 11 people left in the game and it's 5-5-1.
Yeah.
So it's just figuring out that balance of what it is. And I get it, it's the first challenge, so no one knows like really what the rest of them will be and how well everyone will do. It's kind of a guessing game, but it's definitely bold to make that decision so early.
Yeah, and it's really interesting watching the way that this tribe kind of starts breaking down, because we see Luke and Lo get together really early, and they immediately connect. And they're like, "Yeah, we can work together," and we see them making like people alliances with each of these other 3 members of this tribe. It's fascinating to see how fast the 2 of them were able to gain everyone's trust and to just propose working together and have all 3 of the other people believe them.
Oh yeah, that's a skill to like get that, and seemingly no one's noticed. So it's just like maybe it'll catch up to them later, but for right now, that's like a great position for both of them to be in. I see them both like at least now the kind of the top of their tribe, and then Emily and Jonathan are, now who are still left, are kind of just kind of between either one of them where they want to go if they ever have to go to tribal again.
Yeah, and seeing them, the way it's first presented to us is they're talking with Jonathan and striking up that 3 with Jonathan. But later on, it's revealed that it's actually Emily who they're thinking of working as a third, because they were the first 3 who happened to be in a room together. And again, this is one of those things that happens in minis. You look for any excuse to connect to people. And simply being the first 3 people in a room together can be enough to do that sometimes. So they're discussing who to go. It looks like the decisions between Emily, who did very poorly in that first challenge, or Mike, who did incredibly well in that first challenge, and might be coming off a little intimidating like that. These are just so polar opposites of decisions of who to go after here. What are the merits of going after the intimidating person right away, the person who did perform well in a challenge, versus the person who did not perform well in a challenge?
I guess at least for me, in theory, they might continue to do well in challenges, and you might then expect them to do well in then the merge phase, and then maybe like go on an immunity run or something like that. And then obviously going for the easy person to keep your tribe strong. And it's just kind of deciding which of those you really want to go with and kind of where you want to take the game. And I think a big one is also, especially since a lot of them had played like what they were expecting their own challenge performance to be, I think, taken into account. Like, I think if you've been that person who's gone out because of a challenge, you're probably less inclined to vote someone out for losing a challenge for you. So a lot of things go into it all at once.
Yeah, Emily, like Luke says, she could be an easy vote for next time. If you swap or something and she's on, she does poorly in another challenge, then you can vote her out. You've already voted Mike out, so you've killed 2 birds with 1 stone. But also somebody like Luke, he's very, in your face, or, just loud. And Mike is also that way. So it's like that could have been somebody that Luke could have used in front of him going forward. Whereas Luke can't really hide behind Emily after this unless she does poorly in a challenge. But just from like a gameplay perspective, she's going to be the one hiding behind him and not the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting just to think about the fact that even at the very first vote of this game, people are already thinking ahead to the merge and how intimidating someone like Mike could be in that. We see Mike even discussing in a confessional that he's really worried people saw Monte Carlo and they know how he plays. They know he's a bit villainous, and they know that he can perform at these individual challenges. And I mean, it turns out nobody even knew he had played another game. And it was actually just his performance in this one challenge that kind of frightened people a bit. But I mean, credit has to go to Emily here, positioning herself in a way where, despite her challenge performance, nobody else other than Mike really seemed to want to target her. We get that conversation between Emily and Mike where they awkwardly both kind of sit there and don't say a name at all. And you could tell, like, listening to the way Mike's talking to Emily, that Mike's like, yeah, I'm totally voting for you. And he's very much of the mindset that everyone else in the tribe is thinking the same way as him. But Emily just takes that, goes back to Lo and Luke and says, yeah, I mean, I kind of said I hadn't talked to Jonathan. He's probably going to twist that to say that I threw out Jonathan's name. But, I mean, he's very clear he's voting for me. So can we just vote for him? And the excitement on her face when she says, I want to vote Mike. And they just respond, yeah, let's do that. It's one of those warming moments where it's like, oh, that was way too easy. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And in this time period, Luke is talking to Emily. He's like, okay, who is the third name, though? Because he figures if Emily and Mike are talking to each other, then there has to be a third name that's going up there. And of course, we, the viewers at this point, know there's no third name. Neither one of them really wanted to budge at all. And even when Emily's retelling that to Luke and says, I said I never talked to Jonathan, and Luke just immediately jumps to the conclusion, oh, so Jonathan's the third name. This is a really bold approach to the game there. Just like immediately assuming based on that Jonathan's name is the one that was being thrown out as a possible option. It's at this point that I realized Luke was being rather a bit forceful with some of his takes during this scramble round.
Yeah, he seems to be, I guess, kind of in the head position. So it kind of behooves you to almost be a little bit more bold, but it's probably not going to help as you keep doing it. And if you keep making like bold assumptions, essentially like that you might not pan out well for you longer term, even if in the short term, fine, because you're not on the table, and you're still kind of controlling what's going on essentially.
Yeah, it's tough to keep up, throughout the game. We see it in the next episode too with Lex, where they're just like, I'm going to make sure I'm good with everybody. And let me tell you what's going on, where I would actually, honestly, I would rather be Jonathan in this position at this point, to be honest, because, he seemingly looks like he could be on the outs of the tribe, but also he's not saying much. He's, he can keep it low key, whereas Luke has already put himself out there where he can't take that step back now. He kind of has to keep this up. So, yeah, certainly, interesting gameplay.
You raise a really good point there, because in the first round, if you come out swinging for the fences and start pushing really hard like Luke is here, you do kind of have to keep up that persona for the rest of the game. If you switch and you start tiring out a bit and you kind of fade into the background and stop talking as much, people become more suspicious of that because they remember you being loud. And if they don't think you're being loud anymore, now they think you're conspiring against them. That's a really good observation there, Kyle, where someone like Jonathan, who's kind of like being more observant at this point, just playing ball with whoever's willing to, and still, putting in the effort to make sure it's not him. It's a kind of a preservation thing. It's like a sprinter versus a marathon runner, right? And that's kind of the way you have to approach these one-day games. You have to keep in mind it's a marathon and you're going to be going all day. And you don't want to tire yourself out in the first couple of hours. So we finally get to tribal council. And at this point, Alex asks Emily about her challenge performance and everything. And Emily kind of breaks down how she felt solving that and felt like she was getting close at times. And her facial expression was giving everyone hope, even when there was no hope to be found. And every time she heard the excitement of her tribe, in response to her face, she was like, oh no, I have to stop doing that. I can't do that facial expression anymore. I'm giving them too much hope. Lo talks about how hard it is, especially because this challenge, like you said earlier, Kyle, doesn't involve teamwork at all. this is a very individual challenge because it's a relay and everyone's responsible for their own part. So it's not even like you know how these people are going to work in a tribal setting where you are working together in a challenge. I thought that was a very interesting observation to make because it's not something you really immediately think of when you're competing in these challenges. You're thinking about performance, but you're not thinking about the fact that, oh, this person and this person worked really well together. And from there, I mean, there's a lot of talk about challenges. All we can really talk about at this early stage of the game. There hasn't been enough to really develop much. Jonathan mentions that the challenge demonstrates what people think their strengths are, especially because of the way that people were choosing their role in this challenge. The one word, it's like, what's one of these words you think sticks out to you the most that you can do well? So how it's important to observe what the other tribes chose, who the other tribes chose for each of the legs. And then we get to this vote. And unfortunately for our Monte Carlo alumni, Mike Reick, it is 4 votes for Mike, 1 vote for Emily. Mike gives us some fantastic banter on his way out. Says, I don't know if you've seen my game, but if you did, this is the best decision of your life. Mike, still delivering. Your presence on the show cut way too short, but you still gave us all your character in this one episode. Do either of you have some parting words for Mike as he leaves the game?
Let me pour one out for you real quick, my man. That was the worst thing I've ever seen. So sad.
Yeah, it was so unfortunate. As someone who has had to clip Mike's wings before, it's still sad to see it happen again. It was just like I wanted him to go further this time. Just like knowing, like, I was like, oh, in a mini maybe that'll really, really work. And just unfortunate, just how it goes.
Yeah, I think Mike, maybe any other combination of 4 people with Mike here, he totally survives this one. But he just ended up on the one tribe that decided the strongest person in this challenge needs to go first.
Yeah.
So we get into the second episode now, and we're starting off with Iguazu just kind of talking about tribal council. Emily, of course, riding high after surviving the vote. She's feeling great. Feels she might be in the core of the group, which, as we saw in the last episode, Luke and Lo seem to be leaning that way, that Emily is the third in that group. And Emily also kind of felt that this was the showdown of like the 2 strategists on the tribe, thinking very highly of herself here, it seems. But that this was a showdown between herself and Mike, and she has reigned victorious, getting that early win in the game. Lo kind of talks about the composition of the tribe, how despite losing Mike, who was strong in challenges, she still feels the tribe is strong, should be able to compete well going forward. And Luke is working with Lo. He says in his confessional that Lo is definitely his number one. He's going to work to the very end. He completely expects her to betray him at some point, but that's fine. She's the person he is committing to for this entire game. And that they are, in fact, working with Emily. And that is the core of the tribe. And then we get Jonathan's confessional, where he talks about he just wants to play this honest game. He wants to play with integrity. He doesn't want to lie. I thought this was fantastic foreshadowing for what eventually happens towards the end of this episode, not with Jonathan, which was funny enough. But it's a bold strategy to go into a social strategy game deciding you don't want to lie. What do you guys think of that approach?
I could never. Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of value in being truthful, or at least being seen as truthful. But at the end of the day, sometimes you just gotta lie to people in these games. It's just part of it, because being overly truthful, I feel most of the time only is gonna negatively impact you. Well, especially the longer and longer it is.
Yeah, it's just basically not possible. And you get to the point, if you come into the game with that mindset, you're going to get to a point where you realize that you just can't do it. I mean, you get to the point, all you do is lie to people. You know what I mean? Like and you enjoy it, so hopefully Jonathan can adapt to that part of the game if he does get to that point where he needs to, because you just really can't keep that up for the whole game, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've tried the being honest thing. It just doesn't work. Like you said, there is a point in that game where you have to lie. And hopefully Jonathan realizes that before his decision to just tell the truth comes back to bite him. We switch over to the Tugela tribe for a little bit, and they're kind of talking about their org experience, which is an interesting thing. Sarah and Austin both have never played an org before, never even really knew the org community existed. Sarah talks about how she made a reel on Instagram once about wanting to apply for Survivor, and that's how DCP ended up finding her. Austin, being a patron of the specialists, found out about it that way. But then we find out that, Andrew has quite a bit of org experience, and in his confessional, he even tells us that he's played games with Lee and Luke before, so he has those type of connections on in the game. And we hear, Lex has a couple games that he's played. John's claims to have a couple of games that he's played. So it's really interesting seeing this org experience coming into the game. As someone who, when I played Exile Island, had people talking about, we got to get rid of the people who have played orgs before. It's a little scary to know that it's just this kind of inherent way of rallying against people. Again, it's one of those things that you can latch onto that makes it easier for you to connect to someone. Is there merit in getting rid of people who have played games before, or should post or previous game experience not contribute to the way you play the org you're currently playing? What do you think, Kyle?
Well, I think that there is merit, because you're dealing with somebody who knows what they're doing. They have had experience, and that absolutely helps in this game. I think maybe about 2/3 of this cast or so are vets. So you're not going to be able to get around to all those people. So in that sense, maybe it's not such a great idea, but there is merit to it for sure.
Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think for newbies, it's an easy incentivization to get rid of someone. It's kind of an easy out in a way, to be like, oh, well, this person has a lot more experience. None of us really do. Let's just try and get rid of them. I mean, yeah, long term, I think you shouldn't be debating if that's your end game plan is all newbies, and then you didn't think anything else that's happened. Maybe that's not the best idea. But yeah, for especially early votes like this, I think there is merit to it, to bond yourselves together in some way.
Yeah, it's that latching on to whatever connects you to someone at this point in a mini. So we get to our second challenge, Suck and Blow. So this challenge is comprised of 2 mini challenges. First, 2 members of each tribe will compete in the Suck challenge simultaneously. And then after those 2 compete the Suck challenge, 2 members of the tribe will complete in the Blow challenge simultaneously. So for the Suck challenge, 2 people, they're going to use a straw in their mouth, and using only suction, they have to transport a ping pong ball from one cup to another cup while taking a pit stop on a third cup that's between the 2 cups. They have to transfer 3 of those ping pong balls, and then once both tribe members complete that, the tribe can move on to the Blow challenge, where they have to blow 3 ping pong balls down a bridge comprising of 5 solo cups and 3 index cards, and land the ball in the right side cup at the end of it. What are you guys' impressions of this challenge right away? Do one of these 2 challenges stick out to you as something you would prefer to do? Is there strategy that goes into it? Do you think you can inherently be better at sucking than blowing?
Probably. But I mean, I guess my original thought was like, I'd be fine at both. You know what I mean? Like, I'd just probably hop in there, but I wouldn't have a specific preference. But I guess for other people, uh, maybe they think like they're better at one or the other. I don't really know what you would have used to gauge what would have made you good at the other, like what life experiences you
Yeah.
have. But you know, it's just yeah. It was a fun challenge though. It was a fun little watch.
Yeah, it's a really cool challenge having these two tasks. I tried both of these tasks. I think that the sucking is actually easier. I thought looking at it that the blowing would be easier, but it can be kind of hard to control that ball. The sucking, I didn't know that that was possible. I was amazed. Like, oh, man, you could just pick these ping pong balls up by sucking. So I think I probably would end up doing that one if I had to compete in this challenge in the future.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because when McKenna and Greg suggested this challenge for this game, my first thought was, there's no way that works. And sure enough, you can transport a ping pong ball by sucking through a straw. Easy enough. And also, like you said, controlling that ball as you shoot it down that bridge. The 5 cup mark is just that mark where a normal like exhale doesn't do enough. And the ball kind of like leans one way or the other. So the breath control needed for the blow challenge is actually a lot harder to figure out than one might think. So with 2 tribes having 5 members still, the Kirka tribe and Tugela tribe both have to sit someone out. So we see Lydia sit out for Kirka and Andrew sit out for Tugela, leaving Kirka having Vee and Ben doing suck, Lee and Selkirk doing blow. I probably shouldn't say doing blow, but that's okay. Tugela for suck it have Sarah and Lex, and for blow have Austin and John. And then Iguazu has the suck portion being performed by Emily and Luke, and the blow portion being performed by Jonathan and Webb. We get to this right away, and wow, Ben is very fast at this sucking. There's no other way to put it. You can see Sarah hesitates for a moment because she gets a little confused. She thought the other challenge was going first for a moment, and she like picks up her ping pong ball and has to start again. And by the time she starts again, Ben's done. It's so impressive how fast he did that. And then Lex is not too far behind Ben, but it's just impressive how fast Ben was able to move that ping pong ball. He had that technique down right away.
He just got it. He knew it.
Instinctual.
Yeah.
So then Vee also finishes just shortly after Lex. So with Ben and Vee both done, Kirka can move on to the blowing. This part, one of the funniest moments of the entire episode happens, because I guess someone walks into the room with Emily and starts talking to her. And Emily's just like, no, go away. I am playing Survivor. And while not overall relevant to the episode, absolutely hilarious.
At first, I thought she was yelling at her cat in the background, and I was like, I don't think that's going to do anything.
But that's right, because the cat had just come on screen at that point, too, right?
At the same time, I was just like, you could try, but I don't think your cat's going to care.
Now, we also see that Selkirk, once again, has a very strange choice for equipment he's using, and is using what actually turns out to be practice golf balls. So they kind of look like a very small wiffle ball. So they're like a ping pong ball with holes in it, essentially. Not the easiest thing to maneuver while blowing on. But Iguazu has finished blowing. Iguazu just flew through this challenge. They were fine. And it comes down to Kirka and Tugela. And despite having his strange equipment, Selkirk does manage to complete the challenge. Struggles a bit, but still manages to complete it. Which means Tugela is off to tribal council. We have a little bit of a time where we're meeting up with Iguazu, who's just came first, which is great. They come first in this challenge after losing the last challenge. Luke talks about the fact that he was kind of like got something caught in his throat as he was performing the challenge, so he was gurgling while sucking. And, talks about how there's a Lowe's mentioning how it's kind of stressful coming from a tribal council and then immediately, like, no chance to debrief, get into a challenge. And that's kind of like the big difference between minis and long games, right? Is that go aspect of the mini. How do you prepare yourself for this moment? How do you make it so that when you go from a tribal council and you have to compete again right away, that you're in the right mindset? Michael, what do you think?
Honestly, I think you just have to kind of do it your first time, and that's like the only way I think you can prepare. I don't think like anything I could say to a newbie beforehand will really capture that feeling of just being like, oh God, back to it. More than just experience it and you'll get it.
Mhm.
You'll understand the immediate, just like gotta get back to task on hand type of mentality.
Yeah, mentally it can be tough. It's exhausting. If you make it, especially a long time in the game, you're there all day just doing challenge tribal. You're stressing, you don't have a lot of time to think or decompress and go over things. So yeah, it's tough, and you find that out early on in the game. So that's what they're feeling right now.
Yeah. And at the same time, Emily is feeling, hey, I can't suck at any more of these challenges because that'll give them way too much ammunition to send me home. And we also see this tribe talking about the performances in the first challenge. We see them talking about Austin, how quickly he solved it. And much to Austin's chagrin here, they are in fact saying, yeah, that's kind of dangerous. We need to look out for that. They also talk about how, Selkirk really struggled in that first challenge, and that's something to look out for in case of a swap and stuff like that. And Luke's really, really upset about Lee stealing their answer. It's okay. Like, it's the way it goes sometimes. I'm sorry, we don't have a way of like covering your answer afterwards or preventing people from seeing your answer. So just, you got to bounce back and do it back to him. That's all Lee is proposing here is if Lee's willing to steal your answers, you can be willing to steal Lee's moving forward. We then check in with Kirka. Lydia explains why she stayed out of the challenge. And she says she's not really great with cup challenges. She understands how cups work. She's done it in a few games before. Just not good at them. And her entire mentality behind it is just do what's best for the tribe. And if what's doing best for the tribe is sitting out, that's fine. And we see Andrew say the exact same thing later. Is that the best strategy in this instance for a challenge? Like when you're sitting out this early in a game, it can kind of put this target on you as not being a team player. Is the way Lydia's framing this make her seem more like a team player?
I think part of it comes into the like little challenge discussion time that you do have. If like everyone else is super confident, then you being the person that sits out, it's like cool, whatever. But if everyone else isn't confident and you still end up being the one who sits out, I think it doesn't really look great because then it's like hyper focused on you feel you're even worse than everyone else. So it is kind of like a hard thing. I usually just decide to just try and participate in every challenge that I can just to not even have to think about that. But like at least as long as I do something and I don't completely screw up, it's probably fine. So
yeah, I agree. I've never sat out a challenge. I always want to have some part in it so that if I go home on that challenge, at least I was in it, and I tried. So yeah, it's if people are just sort of like, I don't know, I'll be like, yeah, I'll do it, And if I suck, well, you would have sucked too. So like, you can't use that against me.
Sometimes you just have to make a choice. Sometimes it's just a matter of choosing. I mean, I sat out a challenge once in Exile Island that was standing there with your eyes closed for 10 minutes. Sometimes you just make the decision and it's like, no one else is stepping forward. It's my time, I guess. I'll sit out because you imagine most people enter these games with the anticipation of playing the game. So sometimes it can be hard to come to that conclusion. So seeing someone like Lydia step up as no, it's okay, like I can step back, can be very valuable in tries, especially when she can still provide a performance to win. We have Lee very happy with his performance. He thinks he did really well again. He's getting a little worried about Selkirk supplies. We have small dice and holy balls. So who knows how that's going to impact things moving forward. And Selkirk was feeling pretty down after that first challenge, but he's feeling a lot more confidence now after completing a challenge. So it's good to see him kind of shed the burden of that first challenge and feeling a little better about his place in the game. What's really interesting with this Kirka discussion, though, is that they are looking forward to a swap. They keep talking about a swap. And Lydia mentions how Ben's smart and how everyone on the tribe is smart, but Ben's like smart. And it might be a good idea to keep him around kind of as a shield, but he's someone she has to keep an eye on. And then she mentions the really interesting thing about this tribe where they all have like these really small connections to each other, where Lydia and Vee have the same career path, or Lydia and Vee have the same career path. Lydia and Lee have the same masters. And, Selkirk's kind of this quiet engineering student. V's feeling really good about Ben, and Ben's starting to get a little wary about Lee. And he's really worried about how in a swap position Kirka might be targeted because of how well they have been performing as a tribe. But we finally get to Tugela, and Sarah is explaining she volunteered to do the suck because she felt really confident in it, and she wanted to seem very helpful. She didn't want to sit out. She wanted to make sure she was participating in the challenge. And then she explains her confusion at the beginning, where Alex is explaining just like what the challenge is as we're going through it. And she got confused. She grabbed her ball and she said it kind of like threw her off. So she wasn't ready to do it anymore. And again, as soon as we get into this room with all 5 of these people, we have another person stepping up, Andrew this time, saying, hey, let's scramble. Again, this is a wonderful thing to see in a mini. It's great seeing tribes just go for the scramble right away. And then Andrew mentions why he ended up sitting out, the fact that he was okay with sitting out, but still like really raring to go if anyone wanted him to, but also noticed that he's playing in his garage, his driveway is a little slanted, so his balls were rolling. So he couldn't do the blow challenge at all because his balls kept rolling away from him in the wrong direction. It really goes to show how important it is to like know your setup when you're playing these games. We see groups kind of starting to break off. Jon and Andrew split off together, and it's here where Jon reveals to Andrew he is also from the suburbs of Philly. So we have 2 people from Seattle and 2 people from Philly in here. Is this an imminent war waging? Like, was there any of that type of tension there of like the two cities, West Coast, East Coast, facing off against each other here, with Austin just in the middle, who's also geographically in the middle?
I was kind of hoping for that, to be honest. I love a good, but especially in a tribe this small, like having 2 duos really like vying for that third person. I mean, that's just fun every time.
Agreed.
And then we see that, they're like, okay, well, we should stick together. But even as they're discussing this, Andrew kind of seems a little bit distant to me. I don't know if you guys picked up on that, but even as Jon's kind of suggesting, hey, we're both Philly boys, we should stick together, Andrew's saying, yeah, I totally agree. But I didn't feel like he was meaning he totally agreed.
Yeah, I think Andrew didn't seem like he really knew where he could fit in this tribe. And I think he mentioned that in his final words too. But he just wasn't exactly sure who to go to. I don't think he didn't necessarily have that connection. The Philly thing, I don't think is enough. Didn't seem to be enough, at least, or he didn't gravitate towards Jon really. So I think that was part of where he went wrong for him in this episode, was just not having any strong connection to anybody.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It definitely seemed like Andrew wasn't clicking with anyone on this tribe, really. And we even see, as Andrew and Jon are having this conversation, Sarah, Austin, and Lex are in the other room. And they're just talking about, maybe Andrew's the person to go after too, because he's played a lot of orgs before. And this is where that org experience talk from before the challenge comes into play again, because it's a big focus for this tribe here, and it's a big part of the justification for going after Andrew. And we even have Sarah questioning it at one point, where Lex is really pushing Andrew because of his org experience, and Sarah's just like, "But don't you have org experience? We should go after you too afterwards, right? Like, that's what you're saying to us." Austin and Sarah connect over the fact that they've never played a game before. And Austin is really glad that the group kind of split the way it did, with Sarah, Austin, and Lex in one room, because those were the people he was vibing with. He's feeling the Seattle people. So if this was a war between Philly and Seattle, Austin's swinging over to the West Coast here. Austin says he's a little nervous about Jon, because citing that after the first challenge, Jon was off eating breakfast, and that made him be off screen a lot, and he just didn't trust it. So tell me this: if you've won a challenge and you're sitting there in the winner's room, should you just stay on screen the entire time? Like, can you not take a moment to like catch a breather, fill up your water bottle, any of that type of stuff? Are you supposed to just stay on screen the entire time?
I guess according to Austin, not according to me. I try to, like, it's a long day. Like, realize you gotta eat, you gotta use the bathroom, you gotta do all the like normal stuff. You can't just be sitting there, especially when you win. That's the time to do it. Just like get it all out of the way, so when you do inevitably go to tribal, you'll be ready, and not like scrambling to then be like afterwards during like mid challenge trying to eat or something. You don't want to do that.
Yeah, I didn't think that this was a great thing to say, because he said it to people, right?
He did. Yeah. He said it to multiple people.
Yeah. So overall I like Austin. I think that I like the way that he handled himself in this round for the most part. But I think that this was a little bit of a rookie mistake, where you just don't say like that, where it's like, hey, let's vote him out because he went to go make some food for a few minutes. Like, that's just so out of left field. Nobody is going to get on board with that. And so, yeah, no, I wouldn't have said that.
I mean, in Austin's own words, he even explains that it's really hard to decide who to vote for at this point, because you're still early in the game. You haven't really built these connections or anything. And it's your first time scrambling, so it's the first time like getting those one-on-ones with people. And no one on this tribe was catastrophic in either of these two challenges. Like, everyone performed well. So this tribe almost doesn't even have the challenge performance aspect to go on that Mike was describing in his exit interview about that last round. So Tula's kind of at this place where it's like, you have to work on the social connections here. And then Lex goes to work. And Lex is talking with Jon, and he's like, okay, well, we should go for Andrew. And he continuously gets Andrew and Austin's name mixed up. It's bold. I don't know how much he actually was getting their names mixed up, and I think he was like intentionally doing it or not. But Lex mentioned the fact that Austin said Jon was off camera a couple of times. And like what I mentioned earlier, that Jonathan wanted to be truthful the entire time, Lex is honest this entire scramble room. Like, he's equivocating a bit where he's like misleading people with like half truths, but he provides a lot of information to a lot of different people in this round, and ultimately things go his way because of it. We see that Jon suggests that Lex and Sarah and him work together, and that they should convince Andrew to go for Austin, and vice versa, that Austin should go for Andrew. And so they don't intend to take a fourth in. They intend to just get 3 at this point, is what Jon's suggesting. So we then cut to Andrew talking to Sarah, and saying that he gets good vibes from her and he's willing to be her number one. And then he says the same thing to Austin, that he's willing to be Austin's number one. And Austin, asks, or Andrew, I'm pulling the Lex now and getting Austin and Andrew confused. I knew this was going to happen, but Andrew asked Austin to throw out a name in their conversation, and Austin begrudgingly says Jon. Like, he doesn't really want to say it, but he mentions Jon with the same justification he's given earlier. Lex confirms with Austin and Jon that he's good going Andrew. This is a brilliant moment where the four men are all in a room together, and they're like, okay, we should split up. And Andrew is like, okay, I'll go. And Lex agrees to go with him because they haven't talked yet. And Lex holds back just that little second. He's like, I'm good to go. And then hops out and talks to Andrew. And this conversation between Lex and Andrew is incredible. Like, this is some incredible gameplay from Lex here, where he straight up tells him everything that's been said so far in the round. And Andrew just says, I completely believe you. That was so honest. That's the most honest thing anyone has said to me so far. He's bought it hook, line, and sinker. Andrew wants to go Austin at this point. What do you guys think?
Well, I'll say this conversation, this one-on-one between Lex and Andrew, this happened in my room. So I got to watch this conversation. This whole thing happened live, and I was just amazed the whole time because I had already known that Lex had wanted to vote out Andrew, and I'm like, I cannot believe how well he is lying right now. It's one of the best lies that I've seen, and to have it completely work and then go back and get Austin to believe everything that he's saying. It was really just amazing, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was extremely impressive just to basically fully work over Andrew. Unfortunately for Andrew, but yeah, it was truly like a masterclass in kind of manipulating both the truth to kind of just paint it into however you want them to see it rather than necessarily the actual situation.
Yeah, and that's the most impressive thing about the way Lex approached this conversation, where it wasn't about lying. It wasn't everything he said to Andrew was things that he had heard. He didn't make up anything that anyone was saying. It was just the things he decided to omit made Andrew jump to the conclusions Lex wanted him to. Eventually, we then get to a room with everyone minus Andrew. Andrew's off doing a confessional at this time, and it comes to light that Andrew has promised everyone that he is their number one. And Lex, even in this point, is still doing his revealing the truth and tells Austin, Andrew's going to vote for you, just so you know. And Austin's response to that is, oh, weird. He said I was his number one. And it all comes out. It just solidifies the fact that this vote's going to be for Andrew. There's no suspense in this one. Everyone's very confident it's going to be Andrew. We get to tribal council. We discussed how this challenge is drastically different than the first challenge, where this was a very quick challenge and the first challenge was very long. Sarah makes that interesting point where she brings up the fact that she's the only woman on that tribe. I don't think it was very necessary, but it's an interesting point to note. I probably would have avoided making the distinction, but Sarah goes ahead and says it. They talk about how it's kind of hard to assess what the best move for your game is because it's so early in the game. You still don't really know these people. And then we get to the vote. And McKenna goes and gets up, and Lex is very amused by McKenna's pageantry here. We get some great commentary from some of these people this season. And in the end, it is, in fact, 4 votes for Andrew, 1 vote for Austin. Andrew, sorry, you were the second person voted out. What did you guys think of Andrew's game?
It just was unfortunate that he clearly wasn't feeling his tribe. Mm-hmm. And it was just even as watching it, it became more and more evident, they're clearly getting along better together than any of them really are with him. And it's just bad luck of the draw, really, just because I feel like Andrew could go farther just with a completely different group than just this tribe again. Same situation as with Mike. especially this early, sometimes you just get the wrong tribe for you. It goes how it goes.
Yeah, agreed. He didn't necessarily do anything wrong, I don't think, but nobody else did either. Like there was no real reason to vote anybody out on this tribe over anybody else. So yeah, just not really connecting with anybody. That's all it was. Not that he didn't try. But that's just the unfortunate tribe start.
Yeah, I think this is just one of those instances where you have a tribe, and when everyone in the tribe performs well in a challenge, it does just make it so much harder, and it really puts to test your social skills. And I mean, Andrew was older than everyone else in this tribe, and he just didn't have those connections that other people have. And unfortunately, he is the first to go from the Tugela tribe. That brings us to the end of the recap. But before we go, we have to talk MVP for this week. So, Kyle.
Yes.
Who are you giving the MVP to this week?
Well, it's tough. I was between two people, one from each episode. So honorable mention goes to Lo, because I think that she's great. But I'm going to give my MVP to Lex, just based off what he did in this second episode. And one thing we didn't talk about was his conversation with Jon, which was I was super impressed with, where he said, hey, Austin threw your name out, but I kind of shut that down. So now he's got Jon on his side. So I like what he did in episode 2 more than what Luke did in episode 1, because I said it was similar. But I think when you didn't have that clear target at the second tribal council, so really going for it and making sure that you're well connected and you're not the one going home. I think that was well played. Can he keep this pace up? We'll see. But for these 2 episodes, I got him as the MVP.
All right. And Michael, who is your MVP?
And I'm going to bounce off of what Kyle said and take the honorable mention and go with Lo. I just, within her tribe, that's like the exact spot if I was playing where I would want to be, like having someone who you're very closely aligned with, who's very much like in front of you and people are going to take notice of, and plus 2 people who are kind of more on the bottom and shaky ground, and she's kind of in that very like perfect middle of everything where she's just, there's no real reason to target her at all. And I think she's also like fully aware seemingly of the dynamic, at least as of now, of like what is happening, and where if they stay a tribe for a lot longer in case they don't swap or whatever, like she'll be good for a long time, I think. So
yeah, and it's a tough one, because I think both of these 2 did quite well. I'm going to have to side with Kyle on this one, and I'm going to give my MVP to Lex this week, simply because when there's no one to vote for in a tribe, it's so hard to navigate that. And despite being as vocal and such a big character that Lex is, Lex's name never came up in any of this discussion here as someone to go home, despite the fact that Jon even pegged like the Sarah Lex Seattle connection in that first episode. And his way of manipulating people was just masterful in this. It was an impressive performance. It'll be very interesting to see if people catch on to that later, or if he can continue it later, or if he kind of fades more into the background a little bit. But it's a phenomenal start from everyone in this game, even those who were voted out. Everyone is off to the races. This is set up to be a fantastic season, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens moving forward. But with that, that is the end of our first recap. Thank you again, Kyle and Michael, for joining me today. Don't forget, new episodes of Trinity Falls are coming out every Monday and Thursday, with exit interviews coming out Wednesdays and Saturday, and your weekly recap every Sunday. Make sure to join the Facebook group, follow us on Instagram, and of course, click that like and subscribe button down here so you always know when your Dynamic Character Productions content is coming at you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you again next week.